Are you blind or just plain stupid? You nearly wrecked my car coming around that corner." Vance Harlan's voice snapped sharply as his fist shot forward, smashing into Reid Brooks's jaw with a sharp, violent crack. Reid's head snapped with the impact, his body staggering a step as searing pain exploded through him. But he did not strike back. He did not even raise his hands. Vance Harlan stepped in closer, breath heavy, crowding his space like he owned every inch of it. "People like you don't belong on streets like this," he muttered, shoving him again harder, testing him. Reid's shoes scraped against the asphalt as he steadied himself, calm and controlled. His plain clothes hid everything Vance Harlan could not see. His silence only seemed to fuel the arrogance. Vance Harlan saw hesitation and mistook it for weakness, pushing further, louder, more certain. He had no idea the man in front of him was not backing down. He was waiting, and every second was making Vance Harlan's mistake impossible to undo. Before we go on, tell me where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because the next story is one you simply cannot miss. Sunshine warmed the neat lawns of Willow Creek Estates. Reid Brooks drove his sedan carefully through the suburban streets, his mind heavy with worry. 3 city notices had arrived at his mother's house recently. Violations, they called them. The latest one threatened a fine if the structural issues were not fixed. What structural issues? The house had stood solid for 40 years. Reid gripped the steering wheel tighter. The hardware store bags rustled in the passenger seat beside him. He had gotten everything needed to tackle the so-called violations. Paint for the porch railing, new house numbers, replacement boards for the steps. Small stuff that somehow became big problems when you lived on a street where developers were buying up every house they could get. Something felt different about the neighborhood today. Curtains moved as he passed. People paused their yard work to watch his car. The quiet street felt like it had eyes everywhere. "Almost there, Mom," Reid muttered to himself. Marlene's house was just around the next bend. A tidy brick ranch with blue shutters that she had kept perfect since his father passed away. The sound came first, an engine gunning hard. Then the black SUV appeared, taking the corner way too fast. It barreled straight toward Reid's lane. Reid slammed his brakes. The sedan lurched to a stop. The SUV swerved at the last second, missing his front bumper by inches. Reid's heart hammered in his chest as the vehicle cut across and stopped, blocking the narrow street completely. Both cars sat there facing each other in the middle of the quiet suburban lane. The SUV's door flung open. A man jumped out, tall, broad-shouldered, his face already red with anger. He wore expensive casual clothes, designer jeans, a polo shirt that stretched across his chest, sunglasses pushed up on his head. His short-cropped hair had that distinct law enforcement cut that Reid recognized instantly. "What the hell is your problem?" the man shouted, stomping toward Reid's car. Reid took a deep breath. He had been an FBI agent for over 20 years. He knew better than to meet anger with more anger. He stepped out of his car calmly, hands visible. "No problem here," Reid said. "You came around that corner pretty fast. I had to stop suddenly." The man got closer, his eyes narrowing as he sized Reid up. "I have never seen you around here before." Reid noticed the man's watch, a gleaming Rolex that caught the sunlight, the kind bought with money or given as a reward. He also noticed the man's stance, legs planted wide, chin jutting forward, the practiced posture of someone used to being obeyed. "I am headed to my mother's house," Reid explained, keeping his voice level. "Marlene Brooks, Blue House, 3 doors down." Brooks. The man's lip curled. That old place with the peeling paint. A few neighbors had appeared now. A woman watering flowers across the street paused, hose in hand. An older man walking his dog slowed his pace. They were watching but keeping their distance. "That old place has been her home for 40 years, Reid said. "I am helping her with some repairs today." "Repairs?" The man snorted. About time. This street has standards now. You people need to understand that. Reid felt the words like a slap. You people. He had heard that before. The code was never subtle. I do not think we have been introduced, Reid said, keeping his voice steady despite the heat rising in his chest. I am Reid Brooks. Lieutenant Vance Harlan, the man replied with a smirk, as if the title alone should make Reid step back. I live in the new development at the end of the street. More doors were opening. A teenage boy stepped onto his porch, phone in hand. An elderly couple appeared in their driveway, watching with concerned expressions. Well, Lieutenant Harlan, Reid said, I would appreciate it if you would move your vehicle so I can get to my mother's house. Harlan stepped closer. You know what? I would appreciate if people like you would learn whose street this is before driving like you own the place. It is a public street, Reid pointed out. He had not raised his voice, had not made any threatening moves, but he could see his calmness was only making Harlan angrier. That told Reid everything he needed to know about this man. You got some attitude problem? Harlan growled. He glanced around, noticing the growing audience. You new around here? Because things work a certain way in this neighborhood now. Reid understood what was happening. This was not random road rage. This was territorial, the same force behind those city notices targeting his mother's house. I am not new, Reid said. My mother has lived here longer than anyone else on this block. I grew up in that house. Well, things change, Harlan said with a cold smile. Neighborhoods improve, property values go up, old houses get replaced with better ones. A woman in jogging clothes had stopped nearby. The teenage boy on the porch was definitely recording now, his phone held at eye level. Is there a problem here? The woman called. Harlan ignored her. I own this street, he said, his voice dropping lower, meant just for Reid. Me and my friends at City Hall, the people who matter. Reid noticed the fraternity-style ring on Harlan's right hand, a police academy ring heavy with symbols of brotherhood and loyalty, the kind that meant protection from other officers. I just want to get to my mother's house, Reid said, meeting Harlan's gaze without flinching. Your mother should have sold that dump when she had the chance, Harlan hissed. Voss Developments made a fair offer to all you holdouts. But no, you people always have to make things difficult. Reid felt a chill. So that was it. The notices, the sudden code violations, all pressure tactics to force the remaining original homeowners to sell. Move your vehicle, Lieutenant, Reid said firmly. I have work to do today. More neighbors had appeared now. Doors opened up and down the street. What had started as a near collision was becoming a neighborhood spectacle. You do not tell me what to do, Harlan said, his face flushing darker. Not in my neighborhood. Reid noticed Harlan's body language changing. The man's shoulders tensed, his breathing quickened. His hands, previously gesturing wildly, now formed tight fists at his sides. I am not looking for trouble, Reid said, raising his hands slightly. Just trying to help my mother. You brought trouble when you came here with that attitude, Harlan said through clenched teeth. His jaw tightened as he stepped even closer, invading Reid's personal space. Reid recognized the signs. 20 years in the FBI had taught him to read people in moments of escalation. Harlan's dilated pupils, the vein pulsing in his temple, the way he shifted his weight forward onto the balls of his feet. In that instant, Reid knew with absolute certainty this man was about to get physical. This confrontation was seconds away from crossing a line that could not be uncrossed. The midday sun beat down on the suburban street as Reid Brooks stood beside his car, hands visible at his sides. His calm exterior masked the tactical calculations running through his mind. 20 years of FBI training had taught him to read dangerous situations, and everything about Vance Harlan's posture screamed threat. Harlan circled him like a predator, his expensive shoes scraping against the asphalt. Several neighbors watched from their yards and porches, uncertain whether to intervene. "You think you can just drive through here like you own the place?" Harlan's voice carried down the street. "This is not your territory." "It is a public road," Reid replied evenly. "I am just trying to get to my mother's house." Harlan's face twisted. "Public? This stopped being public when people like me moved in and fixed this neighborhood." He gestured toward the newer homes with their perfect landscaping. "We invested here. We cleaned it up." An older couple had emerged from their house across the street. The woman whispered something to her husband, who nodded gravely. "My mother's house is not broken," Reid said. "It has been well maintained for 40 years. "Your mother's house is an eyesore," Harlan spat, "bringing down property values, making the street look bad." Reid felt heat rise in his chest, but kept his expression neutral. "That is not true, and you know it." From the corner of his eye, Reid noticed a teenage girl with dark hair stepping onto her front porch. Sofia Ramirez. Reid recognized her from his visits to his mother. The girl was holding her phone at chest level. The camera lens clearly pointed their way. Harlan stepped closer, invading Reid's personal space. "You know what your problem is? You people never know when to back down." "You people?" Reid repeated quietly. Harlan's eyes narrowed. "Yeah, you heard me." Reid noticed more phones appearing in windows and doorways. The street had become an audience, and Harlan was performing now. "Lieutenant," Reid said calmly, "I think we should both get back in our vehicles." "And do not tell me what to do," Harlan shouted, his voice echoing between the houses. "I own this street, me and people who matter in this town." A woman in a jogging outfit had stopped nearby. "Hey, leave him alone," she called. Harlan ignored her, focusing all his anger on Reid. "You think you can talk to me like that in front of my neighbors?" "I have not disrespected you," Reid said. "I have been calm this whole time." "That is the problem, standing there all high and mighty, like nothing touches you." Harlan's face had turned deep red. "Like you belong here." Reid stood his ground. "I am not going to be bullied off a public street." Harlan moved in closer. "Bullied? You have not seen bullying yet." He jabbed a finger against Reid's chest. "You want to see bullying?" Reid did not flinch. "I want to get to my mother's house." The teenager, Sofia, had moved to the edge of her yard, phone still recording. More neighbors had gathered, their expressions a mixture of concern and discomfort. "Your mother should have sold when she had the chance," Harlan hissed. "Voss made fair offers to all you holdouts." "Not interested," Reid said firmly. Harlan's breathing grew heavier. "Then you will get what is coming to you. All of you." Harlan planted his feet and squared his shoulders. Reid recognized the stance immediately, the prelude to violence. He considered his options. He could defend himself, but that might escalate the situation beyond control. He could retreat, but that would put him at a tactical disadvantage. Before Reid could decide, Harlan's hand shot out, shoving him hard in the shoulder. "You backing down now?" Harlan taunted. "Do not put your hands on me," Reid said, his voice low but firm. "Or what?" Harlan sneered. The tension crackled between them like electricity. Reid could feel the eyes of the neighborhood on them, witnessing this raw display of power and control. Harlan's right hand curled into a fist. "I have been real patient with you." "Officer, please," called an elderly man from across the street. "There is no need for—" Harlan spun around. "Stay out of this." When he turned back to Reid, something had changed in Harlan's eyes. A decision made, a line about to be crossed. "Last chance," Harlan growled. Reid stood his ground. "I am not looking for trouble." Too late for that. Harlan's fist came without warning, a brutal right hook that slammed into Reid's left cheek. The force of the blow sent pain exploding through Reid's skull and knocked him off balance. Gasps rippled across the street. Someone shouted, "Oh my God!" Reid stumbled, dropping to one knee on the asphalt. His vision blurred as hot pain throbbed through his face. He tasted copper blood from where his teeth had cut the inside of his cheek. 20 years of training screamed at him to counterattack, to protect himself, but he fought the instinct down. Harlan loomed over him, breathing hard, fists still clenched. That is what happens when you do not listen. Reid touched his fingers to his cheek, coming away with blood around them. The shocked silence had given way to urgent whispers and the unmistakable sound of someone calling 911. He just hit him. Did you see that? He did not do anything. Sofia Ramirez stood frozen, her phone still recording, her eyes wide with shock. In the distance, the wail of a siren cut through the suburban quiet. Someone had called the police. Harlan's expression shifted as he registered the sounds and the reactions of the neighbors. The confidence drained from his face, replaced by something calculating. Reid recognized it immediately, the look of a man already crafting his story, already planning his defense. The patrol car turned onto their street, lights flashing. Harlan took a step back, straightened his shirt, and ran a hand through his hair. "You brought this on yourself," he said, but the words lacked the certainty of moments before. Reid rose slowly to his feet, the pain pulsing through his face with each heartbeat. Blood pooled in his mouth, and he turned to spit it onto the asphalt. The metallic taste lingered on his tongue. The patrol car pulled up beside them, and two uniformed officers jumped out, hands hovering near their weapons as they assessed the scene. "What is going on here?" demanded the first officer, a young man with a crew cut. Before Reid could speak, Harlan stepped forward, suddenly composed and professional. "Officer Hale," he said, his voice transformed into something authoritative and calm. "Glad you are here. We have got a situation." The patrol car's red and blue lights pulsed against the suburban homes as Officer Hale stepped between Reid and Harlan. The second officer, his nameplate read Cortez, motioned for Harlan to move back toward the SUV. "He attacked me," a woman shouted from her front lawn. "That man in the black shirt hit him for no reason," other voices joined in. "I saw the whole thing. He punched him right in the face. Check the video. Sophia has it on her phone." Officer Hale raised his hands. "Everyone, please stay back. We are handling this." Reid leaned against his sedan, the side of his face throbbing. He touched his cheek gingerly, feeling the swelling already starting beneath his fingertips. Across the street, he could see Sofia Ramirez still holding her phone, her mother now standing protectively beside her. Harlan's voice cut through the commotion, suddenly professional and controlled. "This man aggressively approached my vehicle after a near collision. When I attempted to defuse the situation, he became confrontational and rushed toward me." Reid watched Harlan transform before his eyes. The rage-filled man who had punched him moments ago, now replaced by a calm, articulate officer of the law. Harlan straightened his posture and adjusted his shirt collar. "I identified myself as law enforcement and took necessary defensive action when he advanced on me." Harlan continued, "Several witnesses can confirm he was the aggressor." Officer Hale nodded, jotting notes. "Sir," he said, turning to Reid, "what is your version of events?" Reid took a steady breath. "My name is Reid Brooks. This man cut me off in traffic, then jumped out of his vehicle, shouting. When I explained I was headed to my mother's house on this street, he became increasingly agitated. He verbally threatened me, shoved me, then punched me in the face. At no point did I advance toward him or threaten him physically." "He is lying," Harlan interjected. "Classic case of trying to flip the script." Officer Cortez approached. Sir, do you require medical attention? Reid wiped blood from his lip. No, I will be fine. Officer Hale looked uneasy as he glanced between the two men. The crowd of neighbors had grown, with at least a dozen people watching from yards and porches. Could I speak with you privately for a moment, officer? Reid asked quietly. Hale nodded, and they stepped a few feet away from the others. In a low voice, Reid said, I should inform you that I am FBI Special Agent Reid Brooks. My credentials are in my wallet if you need to verify. Hale's eyes widened. FBI, sir, I am not here in an official capacity, Reid clarified. I am visiting my mother, Marlene Brooks. She lives at 1478, just down the block. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Officer Hale stood straighter, his demeanor becoming more formal. He glanced back at Harlan, who was watching them with narrowed eyes. One moment, sir, Hale said, then walked over to speak with his partner. Reid observed their whispered conversation. Officer Cortez's head snapped up to look at him, then back to Harlan. Within seconds, Harlan's confident expression faltered. His face drained of color as the officers approached him. Lieutenant Harlan, Hale said stiffly, could we have a word? The three men huddled in conversation. Harlan's posture grew increasingly defensive, his gestures sharp and agitated. He glanced repeatedly at Reid, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning recognition that the situation had fundamentally changed. Sophia Ramirez's mother called out, Officers, my daughter has the whole incident recorded. Would you like to see it? Officer Cortez nodded. We will need that footage for the report, ma'am. Reid felt a surge of grim satisfaction. With witnesses and video evidence, the truth would be undeniable. For a moment, he believed justice might be swift and straightforward. Officer Hale returned to Reid. Agent Brooks, Lieutenant Harlan claims there was a misunderstanding. We will need formal statements from everyone. Would you like to press charges? Several neighbors had edged closer, clearly expecting Harlan to be handcuffed on the spot. Even Sophia, still holding her phone like a weapon, looked expectant. Reid could have demanded immediate action. He could have used his authority to ensure Harlan was treated like any other citizen who had assaulted someone. But 20 years of federal service had taught him the value of doing things properly. I want this documented correctly, Reid said calmly. Full statements, witness accounts, and the video evidence preserved. I am not asking for special treatment, just proper procedure. Hale nodded, relief visible in his eyes. Yes, sir. We will take your statement first. As Reid gave his official account, he noticed Harlan on his phone, stepping away from Officer Cortez. Harlan's voice was too low to hear, but his urgent manner suggested he was not calling his insurance company. After statements and evidence collection, the officers informed everyone they would file a complete report. They spoke to Harlan separately before he climbed into his SUV and drove away, leaving Reid with a sense of unfinished business. You should get some ice on that, suggested an older woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Whitaker. That is going to bruise badly. Thank you, Reid replied. I will do that. We all saw what happened, she assured him. That man has been troubled since he moved in last year. Reid nodded gratefully and returned to his car. As he settled behind the wheel, the adrenaline began to fade, leaving behind anger and a profound sense of violation. He drove the remaining distance to his mother's house, pulling into the familiar driveway of the modest but well-maintained two-story home where he had grown up. Marlene Brooks was waiting at the door before he could ring the bell. At 79, she still stood straight-backed and keen-eyed, her silver hair cut in a practical bob. "Reid, what on earth?" Her words cut off when she saw his face. "Come inside right now." The familiar scent of Marlene's house, lemon polish and fresh laundry, enveloped him as he followed her into the kitchen. Without a word, she went to the freezer, wrapped ice cubes in a dish towel, and handed it to him. "Sit," she commanded. Reid pressed the makeshift ice pack to his cheek and sank into a chair at the kitchen table, the same maple table where he had done homework decades ago. "What happened to your face?" Marlene asked, her voice calm but tight with concern. Reid described the confrontation in measured terms, trying to minimize the ugliness of it. But Marlene Brooks had raised him alone after his father passed away. She could read between his lines. "He said he owns this street. Those exact words?" she asked. "Yes, right before he hit me." Marlene's lips pressed into a thin line. She pulled out a chair and sat across from him, her hands folded on the table. "I wish I could say I was surprised," she said quietly. Reid lowered the ice pack. "What do you mean?" "That man, Harlan. He has been circling this block like a vulture for months." Marlene's voice was steady, but Reid caught the underlying tension. "Always finding reasons to slow down in front of certain houses, mine included. Has he bothered you personally?" Reid felt a fresh surge of anger. Marlene sighed. "Not directly, but 3 weeks ago, I got that citation about my front steps needing repair. Then, last week, they claimed my oak tree is diseased and needs to come down." "The oak is perfectly healthy," Reid protested. "I checked it when I was here last month." "Of course it is." Marlene reached for his hand. "Reid, the Williamsons sold their place after getting hit with thousands in code violations. The Hernandez family moved out after their water line mysteriously broke twice in 1 month." "Reid, this is not random," Marlene said, pushing herself up from the table. Her movements were careful, deliberate, the way she always moved when deeply troubled. "Let me show you something." Reid watched as his mother disappeared into her small home office. The ice pack had numbed his face, but anger still burned hot beneath his skin. He had spent decades investigating civil rights violations. Yet here was his own mother dealing with something that felt eerily familiar. Marlene returned carrying a manila folder stuffed with papers. She set it on the table with the weight of evidence. "This started months ago." She spread the contents across the maple tabletop. Official-looking letters with the city seal, violation notices on bright yellow paper, a formal condemnation threat for her front steps, and multiple citations for her oak tree. "This one came first," she said, pointing to a notice. "Claimed my trash cans were visible from the street outside of collection days. I have kept them in the same spot for 20 years. Reid picked up the citation. $150 fine for a first offense. That is excessive. The next week they said her mailbox was not regulation height. She tapped another notice. Then it was peeling paint on the garage door. After that, the steps became structurally unsafe. Reid examined each document with growing concern. "These are all signed by different inspectors because they are making it up as they go," Marlene said flatly. "The Johnsons next door have not received a single citation. Neither has the Miller family across the street." "Who else is getting these?" "Mrs. Washington at the corner, the Taylors 3 doors down, Mr. Alvarez behind me." Marlene's voice grew quieter. "All of us who have been here over 20 years. All of us who said no to Horizon redevelopment." Reid looked up sharply. "Someone tried to buy your house?" Marlene nodded, retrieving a business card from the bottom of the folder. "A woman named Cassandra Voss came by months ago. Very polished, expensive suit. Said they were revitalizing the neighborhood and offered cash. When she said no, she smiled and said she should reconsider before property values affected her retirement." Reid took the card. Embossed lettering read, "Cassandra Voss, Executive Vice President, Horizon Redevelopment." He committed the name to memory. 2 weeks after she refused, the citations started. Mrs. Washington got them too. The Garcias held out for a month before selling. Their house is being gutted now. Marlene's fingers trembled slightly as she gathered the papers. The Williamsons left after their basement was suddenly not up to code and they faced $30,000 in repairs. Reid pulled out his phone and began photographing each document. Has Harlan been involved in any of this? He drives by, slows down, watches who comes and goes. Marlene's voice hardened. Last month, he ticketed every car on Mrs. Washington Street during her grandson's graduation party. Said they were creating a hazardous situation. The pieces were falling into place. This was not just a hot-headed cop with road rage. This was systematic pressure, coordinated harassment designed to wear people down. Who else should I talk to? Reid asked. Mr. Alvarez keeps detailed notes. The Taylors installed cameras after someone repeatedly knocked over their mailbox. Marlene hesitated. But people are scared, Reid. They have gone quiet. When the police are part of it, who do you call? Reid finished photographing the documents, his jaw tight. I need you to tell me everything. Every interaction, every citation, every unusual incident. They spent the next hour at the kitchen table, Marlene recounting a pattern of selective enforcement and intimidation that had slowly tightened around certain homes on the block. Reid took careful notes, the investigator in him cataloging names, dates, and potential evidence. What about that redevelopment company? He asked. Have you seen Voss again? Not her personally, but men in horizon shirts have been surveying the vacant lot at the end of the block, and last week Harlan was talking to one of them. Marlene's eyes met his. They are working together, are they not? Reid nodded grimly. It looks that way. Later, as evening settled over the neighborhood, Reid sat on Marlene's front porch. The bruise on his face throbbed despite the ibuprofen. He watched the quiet street, noting which houses had lights on, which remained dark. 2 doors down, a for-sale sign had recently gone up. Across the street, a home sat empty, waiting for renovation. His phone vibrated. Lila's name flashed on the screen. Hey, sweetheart, he answered, trying to keep his voice normal. Dad, what is going on? His daughter's voice was sharp with concern. There is stuff circulating online about you getting into some kind of fight with a cop in Grandma's neighborhood. Reid straightened. How did you hear about that? It is already spreading. Someone posted about it in a local Facebook group, said there was an altercation between a visitor and an off-duty officer. Lila's words came faster. Dad, please tell me what happened. It is being handled, Reid said, keeping his voice steady. I will explain everything when... His words stopped as he glanced at his phone. Lila had sent him a link. He tapped it open to find a video clip already circulating on social media. The footage showed him standing beside his car, then taking a step toward Harlan. But crucially, the clip ended before Harlan threw the punch. The caption read, FBI agent confronts local police in suburban dispute. Dad, are you still there? Lila's voice grew more worried. Reid stared at the incomplete footage, suddenly understanding the stakes with perfect clarity. The machine was already moving to protect itself. They were rewriting the narrative before the bruise on his face had even fully formed. I need to call you back, he said, his mind racing through implications and necessary next steps. I am at Grandma's. I am fine. But Lila, this is bigger than it looks. He ended the call and watched a car slow as it passed Marlene's house. The driver stared directly at him before continuing down the street. Reid recognized the deliberate pace, the assessment happening behind that glance. He had seen it countless times in his career, the look of someone mapping territory, noting vulnerabilities. They thought they owned this street, and now they were watching him. The living room lamp cast soft shadows across Marlene's face as she leaned toward the phone on the coffee table. Reid sat beside her, an ice pack pressed against his swollen cheek. Lila's voice crackled through the speaker. Dad, it is getting worse. They are controlling the story already. Lila's frustration was clear, even through the phone. The clip that is going viral is cut to make you look like you stepped toward Harlan first. Reid closed his eyes briefly. What exactly are people seeing? Just you getting out of your car and moving toward him. It cuts off right before he hits you. Lila's typing could be heard in the background. And now the police department just released a statement calling it a mutual altercation between two adults that unfortunately escalated. Mutual? Reid's voice stayed level, but his fingers tightened around the ice pack. The man sucker punched me in broad daylight. This is exactly how truth gets buried, Lila said, her producer instincts kicking in. First, they create confusion with edited footage. Then, they use official language to make it sound like both sides were equally wrong. Next comes public doubt about what really happened. Marlene shook her head. Nobody is going to speak up either, not against Harlan. Why not? Lila demanded. Marlene's weathered hands folded in her lap. Because he is protected, honey. Connected. Everyone knows what happens to folks who cross him. She looked at Reid. Remember Mrs. Wilson, who lived on the corner? After she complained about Harlan harassing her grandson, her car got vandalized 3 times. Her insurance dropped her. Next thing, she was packing up to live with her daughter in Ohio. Reid pulled out his notebook and began writing. I need names, dates, every detail. His FBI training took over as he documented Harlan's appearance, his language during the confrontation, the private security decal he had noticed on Harlan's vehicle. What was the security company? He asked, pen hovering. Ridgecrest Security, Marlene answered. They are the ones who patrol for that new development company, the one run by that woman who keeps sending me letters about selling my house. Lila's voice sharpened. Dad, I think you should file charges immediately. I will, Reid said. But first, I need to understand what we are dealing with. This was not random, and I do not think it is just about one angry cop. You are staying tonight, right? Marlene asked, worry creasing her face. Yes, I am not leaving you alone. Reid touched his mother's hand. I will take the guest room. Hours later, close to midnight, Reid stood at Marlene's front window. The neighborhood was quiet except for distant dog barks and the occasional passing car. He pulled back the curtain slightly when headlights appeared at the end of the street. A dark sedan rolled slowly down the block, its engine barely audible. As it approached Marlene's house, it slowed even further, almost crawling past their driveway. The window was down, and Reid could make out a silhouette studying the house. The car lingered for several seconds before continuing down the street. Reid let the curtain fall back into place. The message was clear. They knew exactly where he was, and they were watching. Reid woke with a start, his neck stiff from a night on Marlene's old couch. He had insisted his mother take her own bed despite her protests. Early morning light filtered through lace curtains, casting dappled patterns across the living room. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then the dull ache in his jaw reminded him. Despite the early hour, he heard Marlene in the kitchen, the familiar clinking of a spoon against a coffee mug. Reid stretched and walked to the front door to check the street. That is when he saw it. A crisp white envelope pushed halfway under the door. Not mail, not a package, a hand-delivered message. Reid knelt and carefully picked it up, noting there were no fingerprints besides his own now marring the surface. The envelope contained an official-looking notice from the city's Code Enforcement Division, citing Marlene for vegetation encroachment and structural maintenance violations. He stood in the doorway, scanning the empty street. Whoever delivered this had come and gone in the pre-dawn hours. A message timed like a threat. We know where you live. We are watching. We are not stopping. Is that another one? Marlene appeared behind him, coffee cup in hand. Reid turned. Same department, different violation. Third notice this month. Marlene's voice was calm, but Reid caught the worry in her eyes. They used to come every few months. Now it is every week. Reid added the notice to his growing file. I need to talk to the neighbors today, while yesterday is still fresh in everyone's mind. I will make some calls, Marlene said. People will talk to you if I introduce you. After a quick breakfast, Reid and Marlene began their neighborhood canvass. Their first stop was the Ramirez household where Sophia, the teenager who had recorded the assault, lived with her mother. Mrs. Ramirez answered the door cautiously, recognition and worry flashing across her face when she saw Reid's bruised cheek. Sophia showed me what happened, she said, inviting them in but glancing nervously at the street. It was terrible what that man did to you. Sophia joined them in the living room, phone clutched in her hand. I got everything, she said, from when he jumped out of his car to when he hit you, clear as day. We need that video, Reid said gently. The one online has been edited to make it look like I started it. Mrs. Ramirez shook her head. 2 officers came by last night asking if Sophia had filmed anything. They said they wanted to secure all evidence. Fear tightened her voice. We told them no. You lied to the police? Reid asked. We had to, Sophia insisted. I heard what they are saying online about you. They are twisting everything. Mrs. Ramirez touched her daughter's shoulder. We cannot get involved. My husband's work permit renewal is pending. We cannot risk. Reid nodded, understanding their impossible position. Keep the original file safe, he told Sophia. Do not delete it, but do not share it yet either. Their next stop was Eleanor Caldwell's meticulously kept bungalow. The elderly widow invited them to her sunroom where African violets bloomed in the window. 6 citations in 4 months, Eleanor told them, spreading papers across her table. First it was my front steps. Too steep, they said. Then the porch railing. Then the gutters. I fixed everything, but they keep finding more. When did it start? Reid asked. After I told that Voss woman I was not selling. Eleanor's voice hardened. Next day, Harlan drove by real slow. Day after that, first citation arrived. 2 doors down, Victor Lang, a Vietnam veteran with a flagpole in his yard, shared a similar story. He had applied for a permit to build a wheelchair ramp. His wife has MS. Victor's weathered face tightened. Denied 3 times over aesthetic concerns. When I spoke up at a zoning meeting, my car got ticketed every day for a week. Harlan was parked across the street the morning I found my mailbox smashed. By midday, Reid had filled pages with accounts that all pointed to the same pattern. Refuse to sell. Face harassment. Complain publicly. Face consequences. Stand your ground. Get ground down. His phone rang. It was Lila. Harlan is not being arrested, she said without preamble. Local news is reporting he is on administrative leave pending review. That is code for paid vacation until this blows over. I figured as much, Reid replied, watching a patrol car cruise slowly past Victor's house. How soon can you get here? I am already on my way. 2 hours tops. I am bringing recording equipment. Reid spent the afternoon methodically documenting everything, restraining himself from making calls to federal contacts. He needed to build this case properly, establish the pattern beyond any individual incident. His face throbbed as a reminder of what happened when systems failed. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Marlene's front yard, Lila's car pulled into the driveway. She jumped out, laptop bag slung over her shoulder, determination in every step. Reid met her on the porch. The moment she saw his face, the bruise now a deep purple spanning his cheekbone, her professional composure cracked. She wrapped her arms around him, hugging him fiercely. I cannot believe they did this to you, she whispered. It is not just me, Reid said as they separated. Come inside. I need to show you everything I have gathered." In Marlene's dining room, Reid spread out his notes, photos, and the timeline he had constructed. Lila examined everything, her producer's eye picking up the narrative thread instantly. "This is not random," she said, connecting the dots on Reid's timeline. "The citations, the harassment, the selective enforcement, it is coordinated." She looked up at her father, her expression hardening. "We are not dealing with one violent cop, Dad. This is an organized machine. They are systematically forcing people out, and they are using the police, code enforcement, everything at their disposal to do it." Marlene placed a pot of coffee on the table. "Been telling people for months, but nobody wants to hear an old woman's conspiracy theories." "It is not a theory anymore," Reid said, placing his hand over his mother's. "And we are going to prove it." Lila squared her shoulders the same way she had since childhood when facing a challenge. "Where do we start?" "We map every incident, every player, every connection," Reid replied, his FBI training coming to the fore. "Then we find their weak point." The streetlights flickered on, illuminating Marlene's front yard. The same yard now cited for vegetation encroachment. The same home they were trying to take. The same community being deliberately dismantled. One citation, one threat, one punch at a time. Evening settled into Marlene's dining room like an old friend. The overhead light remained off, with only a single table lamp casting long shadows across the wooden surface. Reid, Lila, and Marlene hunched over a growing collection of evidence spread across the table. City notices with matching dates, a handwritten list of neighbors who had been targeted, and photographs of recent property sales in the neighborhood. Lila tapped her pen against a notepad. Frustration evident in every movement. "We need to go public with this now, Dad. You were assaulted by an off-duty cop in broad daylight. That is the headline that gets attention." Reid shook his head, wincing slightly as the movement aggravated his bruised cheek. "That is exactly what they expect us to do. Make it about one incident, one bad apple." "It is not just about the punch," Lila insisted, her voice rising. "It is about everything behind it, the harassment, the intimidation." "Which is why we need a complete case," Reid countered. "Not just outrage." Marlene watched her son and granddaughter from the head of the table, her expression calm but eyes alert. "By the time we build your perfect case, they will have buried everything," Lila argued. "I have seen how this works. First, they control the narrative. Then they wait for public interest to fade. Then it is yesterday's news." Reid leaned forward. "And I have seen how cases collapse when you move too fast. These people have institutional protection. The department, the union, city officials, they are all connected. We need more than just what happened to me. While we wait, they are squeezing more families out." Lila's palm hit the table, scattering some papers. Reid reached across and covered her hand with his. "I know you are angry. I am too. But I have spent my career building cases that stick against people who thought they were untouchable. Trust me on this." Their eyes met, the same determined expression on two different generations. Lila finally conceded. "I will wait before I start making calls to my contacts." Reid nodded, then reached for his phone. "I need to bring someone else in, someone I trust." He dialed Colton Doyle, his colleague at the Bureau. After 20 years working together, Doyle was the one person Reid knew would approach this situation with both caution and commitment. Doyle answered on the third ring. "Brooks, it is Sunday night. Either you miss me terribly or something is wrong." Reid managed a small smile despite the pain. "Need your eyes on something unofficially." He outlined the situation, keeping his voice low and measured. "Send me everything you have," Doyle replied, his tone shifting from friendly to professional. "But Reid, once these local players figure out you are federal, they will not make stupid mistakes anymore. They will get careful, strategic." "That is what I am counting on," Reid said. "Careful leaves traces." After ending the call, Reid turned back to find Lila already on her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Following the money," she replied without looking up. "Every sale on this block in the last 18 months. Property records, corporate filings, LLC registrations." For the next 2 hours, Lila dug through public records while Reid organized witness statements and Marlene made fresh coffee. The dining room fell into a rhythm of keyboard clicks, paper shuffling, and occasional murmurs of discovery. "Got something?" Lila announced just after 11. 3 properties sold in the last year all went to different buyers on paper, but they all trace back to subsidiary companies controlled by Apex Partners. "Who is behind Apex?" Reid asked, moving to look over her shoulder. "Cassandra Voss is the CEO." Lila pulled up a corporate photograph of a polished woman in her 50s with a practiced smile. "She is on the Chamber of Commerce, the Community Foundation Board, and donates to every political campaign in the county." Reid wrote the name down. Voss, Harlan's SUV had a security decal linked to her contractor. Marlene stood silent at the edge of the light, watching them work. Something in her posture caught Reid's attention. "Mom, what is it?" She hesitated, then spoke quietly. "She came to see me. Miss Voss about 6 months ago. Very polite, very understanding, offered what she called market value, plus consideration for my circumstances." Reid set down his pen. "You never mentioned this." "Did not seem important at the time. I said no." She smiled like it did not matter. And a week later, the first notice came. Marlene's gaze dropped to the papers on the table. "Last month, when the water heater broke and they said my electrical was not up to code, I almost called her just to make it all stop." The admission hung in the air like smoke. Reid felt something twist in his chest, harder and deeper than the physical blow he had taken. The thought of his mother, proud, independent Marlene, being worn down to the point of surrender, wounded him in ways Harlan's fist never could. Lila reached for her grandmother's hand. "They are not getting this house. Not your home." Reid stood up, needing movement. "I am going to step outside for a minute." Oh, the night air felt cool against his face as he stood on Marlene's front porch. The street was quiet except for distant traffic and the soft chirping of crickets. He inhaled deeply, trying to clear his head. A patrol car turned onto the block, moving slowly. Reid watched as it approached, then stopped at the corner directly across from Marlene's house. The headlights remained fixed on the property, bright and unmoving in the darkness. 1 minute passed, then 2. A clear message. "You are being watched." Finally, the cruiser pulled away, continuing its patrol with deliberate slowness. Reid did not move until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Then he turned back toward the house, his resolve hardening like cement. This was not just about a punch anymore. This was about his mother's right to live in peace in the home she had owned for 40 years. This was about a community being dismantled through fear. And Reid Brooks had never been the kind of man who backed down from a fight. Morning arrived with a heaviness that hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Reid stood in Marlene's kitchen, studying the new violation notice that had appeared mysteriously under her door. The official city seal and threatening language about immediate compliance made his jaw tighten. "This is harassment, plain and simple," Lila said, pouring coffee into a travel mug. She wore a blazer over jeans, professional enough for City Hall, but comfortable enough for what might become a long day. Marlene sat at the kitchen table, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose as she examined the notice for the 3rd time. They say my front steps do not meet code. Those steps have been the same for 30 years. Reid folded the paper carefully. We are going to get this sorted out today. Should I come with you? Marlene asked, looking up. No, Mom. Lila and I will handle this. Reid squeezed her shoulder gently. Just keep your doors locked. Call immediately if anyone shows up. Marlene nodded, but her fingers tapped an anxious rhythm on the tablecloth. Be careful how you speak to these people, Reid. They know how to twist things. Trust me, he said with a reassuring smile that did not reach his eyes. I deal with bureaucracy for a living. 20 minutes later, Reid pulled into the City Hall parking lot, his bruised face a physical reminder of the confrontation. The modern 3-story building gleamed in the morning light, all glass and concrete efficiency. Look professional, stay calm, document everything, Reid reminded Lila as they walked toward the entrance. I know how to handle officials, she replied. I interview politicians for a living. The building code enforcement office occupied a corner of the first floor. Inside, 3 clerks worked behind a high counter, separated from the public by a glass partition. A woman with bottle blonde hair and a name tag reading Meredith smiled automatically as Reid approached. I would like to discuss a violation notice issued to Marlene Brooks on Maple Street, Reid said, sliding the paper through the small opening at the bottom of the partition. Meredith's smile never changed as she took the notice. Let me pull up that information for you. Are you the property owner? Her son. This is the 3rd notice in 2 months, and we believe there has been a mistake. The system does not make mistakes, sir, Meredith replied, her fingers clicking efficiently on her keyboard. If a violation was issued, an inspector found legitimate concerns. Lila leaned forward. Can we speak with the inspector who issued it? Inspector Davidson is not available today. I can schedule you for next week. Next week? Reid kept his voice level. The notice demands compliance within 72 hours or faces fines of $200 per day. Meredith's expression remained pleasant but unmoved. I understand your frustration, but I can only tell you what is in the system. For the next hour, Reid and Lila were shuffled between 3 different clerks, each repeating variations of the same unhelpful responses. No one could explain why Marlene's property suddenly warranted such urgent attention after decades without issues. Finally, a younger clerk with nervous eyes glanced around before whispering, Some addresses get special attention. It is not something we talk about. Special attention? Reid pressed. What does that mean? The clerk's eyes widened at something behind Reid, and he quickly stepped back. I just process the paperwork, sir. I do not make the decisions. A supervisor appeared, introducing herself with practiced efficiency. I understand you have concerns about a notice, but our inspectors follow strict protocols. If you would like to file an appeal, there is a $150 filing fee, and the review committee meets next month. Reid recognized the tactic immediately. Delay, expense, bureaucracy as a weapon. He thanked them politely and led Lila outside. That was a complete waste of time, Lila fumed as they stepped into the sunshine. Not entirely, Reid replied. We confirmed what we suspected. This is not random. They walked toward the parking lot only to stop short at the sight of Reid's car. A bright orange parking ticket was tucked under the windshield wiper. You have got to be kidding me, Lila groaned, plucking the ticket free. Violation. Vehicle parked more than 12 inches from curb. This is ridiculous. You are barely 6 inches from the curb. Reid surveyed the row of cars. Several were parked farther from the curb than his, yet his was the only one ticketed. Lila immediately took photos of the car's position and the surrounding vehicles. They are sending a message, Reid said quietly. They know who we are and why we are here. By early afternoon, they were back at Marlene's house. Reid's laptop was open on the dining room table as he video called with Colton Doyle. "I have been reviewing everything you sent," Doyle said, his face serious on the screen. "There is something interesting in Harlan's employment records." "What did you find?" Reid leaned closer. "He moonlights 20 hours a week for Guardian Security. They are a private firm that handles site security for several development projects in your area." Doyle's face was replaced by documents on the screen. "And 3 of those projects in the last year were managed by Apex Partners, Cassandra Voss's company," Lila murmured. "It gets better," Doyle continued. "Guardian is owned by Victor Kane, former police chief and current head of the police union's Legal Defense Fund, the same fund that would represent Harlan if any complaints were filed against him." Reid wrote the names down, connecting them with lines. "So the man who assaulted me works part-time for a security company owned by the former police chief who provides legal protection for officers. And both companies have business ties to the developer trying to buy out my mother's neighborhood." "It is not proof of conspiracy yet," Doyle cautioned, "but it is enough to show that the same people benefit when homeowners like your mother get worn down and sell." Reid's phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Police came by asking about the video. They wanted to know if it really showed everything." Lila's phone pinged seconds later. She read the message and looked up at Reid, her face pale. "They are pressuring her to change her story." Reid turned back to the screen. "Colton, we need to move faster. They are already working on the witnesses." As evening fell, Lila sat cross-legged on Marlene's couch, her laptop balanced on her knees as she scrolled through files. Suddenly she stopped, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Reid," she whispered. "Sophia might have automatic cloud backup enabled on her phone." He looked up from his notes. "What do you mean?" "Most phones have a setting that automatically backs up photos and videos," Lila explained, her voice gaining excitement. "Even if the original video gets deleted from her phone, or if she edits it, the original might still exist in her cloud storage. If we could recover the unedited video," Reid started. "Then we would have solid proof that Harlan threw the first punch," Lila finished. "Proof that cannot be explained away." Reid felt the first spark of hope since the assault. "Call her right now." Morning light streamed through Marlene's kitchen windows. Reid nursed a cup of coffee while Lila finished her toast. Marlene moved about slowly, arranging fruit on a plate none of them had touched. "You sure this girl will talk to you?" Marlene asked, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen promises break too many times. Lila nodded. "Sophia texted me back last night. Her mom is nervous, but they agreed to meet me at the coffee shop near the high school." She checked her watch. "I should get going." Reid spread his notes across the table. "While you work on the video, I will dig deeper into those property records, and I have got Leonard Hayes from the records department willing to meet me for lunch." "Be careful," Marlene said, squeezing his shoulder. "These people play rough." "That is exactly why we need solid proof," Reid replied. "Not just for me, but for everyone they have been pushing around." Lila grabbed her laptop bag and car keys. "I will call you as soon as I know something." The local coffee shop sat half empty when Lila arrived. Sophia and her mother, Carmen Ramirez, occupied a corner table far from the windows. Sophia, with her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, nervously tapped her fingers against her cup. Carmen's posture was rigid, eyes constantly scanning the door. "Thank you for meeting me," Lila said, sliding into the seat across from them. She kept her voice low and calm. "I know this is scary." "The police came to our house," Carmen said immediately. "They said Sophia could get in trouble for recording without permission, that it might be illegal in some states." "That is not true in this state," Lila assured her. "You have every right to record in public places." Sophia stared at her coffee. "They made me feel like I did something wrong. like I was the criminal instead of that cop. You did nothing wrong, Lila said firmly. You captured the truth. That is why they are scared. Over the next hour, Lila built a careful bridge of trust. She shared stories of her own father's career, fighting civil rights violations. She explained how evidence like Sophia's could protect other families. She never pushed or rushed. Finally, Sophia pulled out her phone. I have the settings that back everything up automatically. My dad set it up after I lost all my photos last year when my old phone broke. Can you check your cloud account? Lila asked. The original video might still be there, even if you deleted it from your phone. Sophia's fingers moved quickly across the screen, navigating through folders. Here, she finally said, turning the phone toward Lila. This is the one I never sent anyone. I was too scared after the cops came. The thumbnail showed a clear image of Harlan and Reid facing each other in the street. Sophia, this could change everything, Lila said. Would you be willing to share this with me? Carmen placed a protective hand on her daughter's arm. What happens if we do? Will those police come back? I promise we will protect your family, Lila said. My father works for the FBI. We can make sure there is no retaliation. Sophia looked at her mother, who nodded slowly. Okay, Sophia said. I will send it to you. Across town, Reid sat in a quiet corner of a diner booth. Leonard Hayes, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a permanent look of worry, slid in across from him. I should not be here, Leonard said immediately, his voice barely above a whisper. If they find out, no one will know, Reid assured him. I appreciate you taking this risk. Leonard pulled a flash drive from his pocket. It is all in here. The patterns are clear once you know what to look for. He slid it across the table. Code enforcement complaints against properties on your mother's street jumped 340% in the last 8 months, and every spike follows the same sequence. Police reports about suspicious activity or quality of life issues, then code violations, then tax reassessments, all targeting properties that have not sold to developers, Reid added. Leonard nodded. Exactly. And there are emails. Voss's company representatives meet regularly with zoning officials and police leadership. They call it neighborhood improvement planning, but it is really identifying which homeowners to pressure next. Can you get me those emails? Leonard swallowed hard. I have flagged them in the system. I can download copies tonight when the office is empty, but after that, I am done. My pension is all I have. I understand, Reid said. One more night is all we need. By midday, Lila and Reid sat side by side at Marlene's dining room table, staring at Lila's laptop screen. The unedited video played with perfect clarity. Watch, Lila said, pointing. Right here. On screen, Harlan jabbed his finger into Reid's chest. I own this street, Harlan snarled, his face contorted with rage. People like you need to learn your place. Then came the shove, followed immediately by the punch. No provocation, no self-defense justification, just raw, unprovoked assault. This is exactly what we needed, Reid said, his voice steady despite the anger seeing it again triggered. The complete context. I have already contacted Vivian at Channel 8, Lila said. She is a serious investigative reporter. No ties to local advertisers or the police union. She wants to see this today. Reid nodded. And Leonard is getting us the email trail tonight. By tomorrow, we could have enough to take to federal prosecutors. For the first time since the assault, hope felt real, not just wishful thinking. The truth was documented. The pattern was emerging. The connections were clear. We are going to win this, are we not? Lila asked. We are going to make it right, Reid replied. Not just for me, but for your grandmother and everyone else they have been pushing around. Evening settled over the neighborhood. Reid and Lila sat on Marlene's front porch, the warm air carrying the scent of someone's distant barbecue. A sense of cautious victory hung between them. "Once Vivian sees this footage, Harlan is finished," Lila said. "There is no spinning his way out of what he clearly did. And Leonard's evidence will connect the dots to the bigger scheme," Reid added. "The harassment, the coordinated pressure, all of it." "I cannot believe we might actually—" Lila stopped mid-sentence, following her father's suddenly tense gaze. Down the block, a dark sedan sat parked under a tree, its lights off. Even in the fading light, they could make out the silhouette of someone sitting in the driver's seat, watching Marlene's house. Reid's jaw tightened. The victory they had been savoring suddenly felt premature. Morning arrived with gray skies and a chill that seemed to seep through the walls of Marlene's house. Reid's phone rang at an early hour. He did not recognize the number, but answered immediately. "Mr. Brooks." The voice was unfamiliar, tight with tension. "This is Officer Ramirez from County Traffic Division. I am calling about Leonard Hayes." Reid's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "Single vehicle accident last night. His car went off Ridgeline Road near the reservoir. Paramedics pronounced him at the scene." The words landed like hammer blows. Leonard, the clerk who had promised emails linking Harlan, code enforcement, and Voss's redevelopment scheme, was gone. "Was anyone else involved?" Reid asked, already suspecting the answer. "No, sir. Preliminary investigation suggests he lost control on a curve." Reid thanked the officer and hung up. Lila found him in the kitchen staring at nothing. "Dad, what is wrong?" "Leonard Hayes is dead. Car crash last night." Lila's face went pale. "Right after he agreed to help us. That is not a coincidence." "No," Reid said. "It is a message." By noon, the day had darkened further. Lila's phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. "Need to postpone our meeting. Legal has concerns about the story. We will update when I can." "They got to her too," Lila said, showing Reid the screen. "Someone leaned on the station." Reid nodded grimly. "They are closing every door." The afternoon brought worse news. Reid's phone lit up with a call from his bureau supervisor. "Brooks, I have got internal affairs asking questions about the incident," he said without preamble. "There is an allegation you leveraged your position during a personal dispute. You are on administrative leave until this clears." "That is ridiculous." "It is procedure. Turn in your credentials tomorrow morning." Reid had barely processed this when a white van with county inspection on the side pulled up to Marlene's house. Two men in uniforms approached with clipboards. "Emergency inspection," one announced without warmth. "We received an anonymous tip about structural dangers." "This house has stood for 40 years, Marlene protested, but they pushed past her. The inspection lasted 20 minutes. Their verdict was immediate and devastating. "Foundation cracks, electrical hazards, possible black mold. We are issuing an emergency vacation order," the lead inspector declared, handing Marlene a red notice. "Property is unsafe for occupancy." "This is fabricated," Reid said. The inspector's face hardened. "You can appeal, but the house is closed effective immediately. You have 2 hours to gather essentials." They had barely begun packing when the sound of breaking glass came from the back of the house. Reid rushed to find the kitchen window shattered, glass across the floor, and fresh damage to the porch supports. "Vandals," he said, but they all knew it was more targeted than that. By sunset, they had crammed Marlene's medications, clothes, and irreplaceable photos into 3 suitcases. Reid watched his mother's face as she locked her front door, knowing she might not return. In a cramped motel room paid for by Lila, Marlene sat on the edge of the bed, her house keys clutched in her wrinkled hands like a talisman. Reid stood by the window, staring into the parking lot, stripped of his badge, his authority, and his confidence. "I tried to do this the right way," he said quietly, "and it has only made things worse." Late that night, the motel room sat in near darkness, lit only by the neon glow filtering through thin curtains. Reid Brooks perched in a hard plastic chair by the window, his back straight despite exhaustion pulling at him. On one bed, Marlene tossed restlessly, her breathing never settling into the rhythm of sleep. On the other, Lila scrolled through her phone, pretending to work, but really just keeping her eyes from closing. Reid's cheek still throbbed where Harlan had struck him, but that pain was nothing compared to the hollow ache in his chest. The bureau suspension felt distant, almost meaningless, next to his failure to protect his mother. He stared at his hands that had built cases against corrupt officials for years, now powerless when it mattered most. "I waited too long," he whispered to himself. "I gave them time to hit back." The sheets rustled as Marlene sat up, not bothering to pretend sleep would come. "You think I am sleeping with all this on my mind?" she asked, her voice stronger than her tired frame suggested. "Come sit here." Reid moved to the edge of her bed, shoulders slumped. "You look just like your father when things went wrong," Marlene said, patting his arm. "Same frown lines." "I should have pushed harder," Reid said. "Flashed my badge, forced their hand." Marlene shook her head. "Listen to me. Decent people lose because they think one truth plainly told should be enough. It never is." Her eyes, despite everything, remained clear and determined. Men like Harlan, they survive by burying truth under paperwork, under fear, under delay. They hide the whole elephant by showing people different parts, never letting anyone see the whole beast. Lila put down her phone, listening. "So what do we do?" Reid asked. "Stop trying to make them admit to one punch," Marlene said. "Gather so much proof they cannot bury it all. One truth they can crush. 20 truths. That is harder." Something stirred in Reid's mind. Not hope yet, but determination. The strategic part of his brain began working again methodically. "She is right," Lila said, sitting up fully. "We have been playing their game on their field." As night thinned toward dawn, Reid's thinking sharpened. He paced the small room, energy returning to his movements. This was not just about an assault anymore. It was not even about local misconduct. "We need to reframe everything," he said. "Civil rights conspiracy, witness intimidation, evidence tampering, fraud through the redevelopment scheme." Lila nodded eagerly. "I will stop waiting for terrified gatekeepers. I will build an independent release plan, something they cannot pressure into silence." By sunrise, pale light spilled through the cheap curtains, painting stripes across the worn carpet. Reid sat at the small desk, a fresh page open in his notebook. His handwriting was precise as he wrote a single word at the top: conspiracy. The sunrise painted the diner windows gold as Reid slid into the vinyl booth across from Colton Doyle. The FBI colleague looked out of place in the roadside diner, his pressed shirt and watchful eyes marking him as law enforcement even without a badge. Lila arrived moments later, laptop bag slung over her shoulder, determination etched into her face. "I am technically not supposed to be here," Doyle said quietly after the waitress poured coffee and retreated. "But some things matter more than protocols." Reid nodded gratefully. "I need to build this right, not just my assault, the whole pattern." "The suspension is procedural nonsense," Doyle said, "but it means everything we gather has to be airtight. No shortcuts." They hunched over a napkin as Reid sketched out their approach. The steam from their mugs fogged the edge of the paper. "I will revisit the residence," Reid said. "Get written statements about the pressure tactics, dates, names, badge numbers when possible." Lila tapped her laptop. "I have already started mapping property acquisitions around Mom's block. There is a pattern to which houses they targeted first." And I have got Sophia's full video ready for distribution when we move." Doyle leaned in, voice dropping. "I cannot officially run this yet, but I can check database access logs. See who pulled information on your mother's address and when. If Harlan used department resources for private intimidation, that is federal." The waitress refilled their cups, eyeing their intense conversation with curiosity. They fell silent until she moved away. "These people are not used to targets who fight back," Lila said. By midday, they had split up. Reid sat in Eleanor Caldwell's living room, recording her trembling voice as she described 3 separate code violations that appeared the day after she declined a courtesy visit from a developer. "I thought I was losing my mind," she said, her thin fingers clutching a stack of notices identical to Marlene's. "They made me feel like I was the problem." Across town, Lila received an email from Sandra Vale, a county records analyst who had spotted the pattern herself. "Look at these timestamps," Sandra's message read. "Code enforcement actions against 6 properties on your mother's block all coincided with redevelopment bidding windows. That is not coincidence." By late afternoon, Victor Lang, the veteran who had moved rather than continue fighting, agreed to speak on record. "I fought in Desert Storm," he said bitterly to Reid. "Never thought I would be driven out of my own country by bullies with badges." As evening approached, they reconvened at the diner. Lila spread printouts across the table, showing a timeline of Harlan's vehicle near disputed properties, off-duty but regular as clockwork. "He was not random," she said, tapping the pattern. "He was the muscle." What had been isolated complaints now formed a constellation of evidence. Victims began to see themselves as witnesses, their individual suffering part of a coherent story. As they pulled into the motel parking lot that night, Lila's phone buzzed with a message from Sophia's mother. The text was simple. "You need to see who was outside that house." Attached was doorbell camera footage from the night of Marlene's vandalism. The motel room felt smaller as they huddled around Lila's laptop. Reid stood behind her chair, hands gripping the backrest. Marlene perched on the edge of the bed, her face tight with worry. Doyle leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Play it," Reid said. Lila clicked the video file. The grainy nighttime footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera filled the screen. The timestamp showed evening. "There," Lila pointed. A white contractor truck with Eastland Construction on the side parked half a block from Marlene's house. 2 men got out and walked toward her property, disappearing from the frame. "Eastland is one of Voss's regular contractors," Doyle noted. "They handle most of the renovations after acquisitions." Lila switched to a second clip. This one from a camera 3 houses down. The angle caught the side street. "Watch this part," she said, her voice tight. At evening, a black SUV, the same model Harlan had been driving, pulled up. Harlan stepped out, looked around, and approached a man in a work jacket who had emerged from the direction of Marlene's backyard. "Turn it up," Reid said. The audio was faint but clear enough. "Make sure it looks random," Harlan said to the man. "Just enough to fail inspection tomorrow." Marlene's hand went to her mouth. "They planned it all." "It is not enough alone," Doyle cautioned. "They could claim they were there for legitimate security concerns." "But it cracks their wall," Reid said. "And walls only need one crack to start falling." The next morning, they gathered at Doyle's apartment. His laptop displayed database access logs he had quietly obtained through a bureau contact. "Here is their fatal mistake," Doyle said, scrolling through the records. "Harlan used the law enforcement database to pull property and personal information on every holdout homeowner on your block. Marlene, he showed them timestamps of searches, addresses, financial histories, even driving records, all accessed through Harlan's credentials. And look at this," Doyle continued, opening another file. Each search aligns perfectly with properties later approached by Voss's acquisition team. Within days of Harlan pulling your information, Marlene, you got your first code violation. Reid studied the screen. This is it. The bridge connecting everything. Assault, harassment, property pressure, and misuse of official resources. This is not just misconduct, Doyle said. This is conspiracy and civil rights violation. I know a federal supervisor who is insulated from local politics. She owes me one, and she hates corrupt cops more than anyone. By Friday afternoon, Doyle had delivered the full evidence package. Meanwhile, Lila's phone lit up with a notification from a community Facebook page. "Look at this," she said, showing Reid a glossy digital flyer. "Cassandra Voss is hosting a neighborhood revitalization event on your mom's street. Harlan and Victor Kane are both expected to attend." "Perfect timing," Reid said, his face hardening with resolve. Morning arrived exactly 1 week after the assault. The same street where Reid had been punched now looked different. Banners hung between light poles, white tents dotted the sidewalks, and catered tables lined the curb for Cassandra Voss's staged revitalization event. Signs proclaimed Eastland Heights, a new vision, with glossy renderings of luxury townhomes where old houses now stood. Reid, Lila, and Marlene sat in a borrowed car half a block away, watching the scene unfold. "There she is," Lila whispered, pointing to Cassandra Voss. Voss glided through the gathering crowd in a cream-colored suit, her red hair styled perfectly. She shook hands and laughed at just the right moments, pointing to property sketches with practiced enthusiasm. Her smile never reached her eyes. "And there is Harlan," Reid said. Vance Harlan stood near the main tent in a tailored navy suit, looking nothing like the rage-filled man from a week before. He laughed loudly, clapping backs and accepting congratulations. No trace of worry lined his face. "He thinks he has won," Marlene said quietly. Victor Kane worked the crowd with political smoothness, moving from group to group, whispering reassurances and controlling the narrative. When reporters approached, he steered them toward prepared talking points about community improvement. Lila checked her phone and nodded to Reid. "Everything is ready." Reid stayed perfectly still, hands folded in his lap. The swelling on his face had faded, but the memory had not. He watched Harlan joke with a city councilman, waiting. Then it happened. 3 unmarked black SUVs flooded in from one end of the street. 2 more blocked the other exit. Conversations died instantly as federal agents in windbreakers stepped out fast, surrounding the scene. "Vance Harlan," a lead agent called out, voice cutting through the sudden silence. Harlan froze mid-sentence, champagne glass in hand. For a split second, his face showed genuine shock before he snapped into motion, backing away, shaking his head. "This is a mistake," he said loudly, voice rising. "What is this?" When agents closed in, Harlan's control shattered. He shoved one hard and tried to break through the crowd. Gasps erupted. A woman screamed as he knocked over a display board. Harlan swung wildly at another agent, desperate, but they converged, forcing him down onto the same pavement where he had stood over Reid. He fought viciously, twisting, cursing, refusing the cuffs. "Do you know who I am? You cannot do this." "Federal agents, you are under arrest for civil rights violations, conspiracy, and witness intimidation," the agent announced loud enough for everyone to hear. Kane stepped forward, voice commanding. "This is completely inappropriate." His words cut off as an agent approached with cuffs. "You are making a serious mistake," he warned before they secured his wrists. Voss's polished composure collapsed as agents surrounded her. Her face drained of color when they mentioned wire fraud and conspiracy charges. At that moment, Lila pressed send on her phone. The full story went live, complete with unedited video, property records, database misuse evidence, and witness statements. Phones throughout the crowd began buzzing with notifications as Harlan was dragged upright, defeated, and exposed. He locked eyes with Reid across the crowd and realized the man he struck never needed to strike back. Late that afternoon, just hours after the arrests, Reid Brooks stood inside Marlene's living room as county officials formally revoked the condemnation order. The inspector, a woman with kind eyes and a firm handshake, looked embarrassed as she stamped the paperwork. "This never should have happened," she said, handing Marlene the official clearance. "We will have a crew out Monday to repair that window properly." Reid watched his mother's face. The relief was there, but something stronger too. Vindication. She took the papers without trembling. "About time," Marlene said, her voice steady as oak. News of the arrests spread like wildfire. Reid's phone buzzed constantly with updates. Harlan faced assault, civil rights violations, and conspiracy charges. His resistance during arrest, caught on dozens of phones, added obstruction and assaulting a federal officer to his troubles. No badge would shield him now. Kane had been removed from the police union in disgrace, stripped of influence as former allies rushed to distance themselves. Several officers had already come forward, admitting pressure to target specific properties. Voss's company assets were frozen under investigation, her carefully constructed empire unraveling with each new document release. 3 city officials had resigned by noon. "Your internal review is closing," Doyle told Reid over the phone. "Cleared completely. The Bureau is backing you 100% now." Outside on the lawn, chairs appeared as if by magic. Eleanor Caldwell brought lemonade. Victor Lang carried over a folding table. Other neighbors who had locked their doors for months now walked freely, speaking in normal voices instead of whispers. Children played near the curb without parents hovering anxiously. The fear had broken like a fever. Lila arrived with boxes of pizza, her phone ringing constantly as larger networks picked up her story. She had not just exposed Harlan. She had exposed the entire system that protected him and others like him. "They are talking about a state-level investigation into similar patterns in other neighborhoods," she told Reid, glowing with purpose. As evening approached, Marlene stepped onto her porch, house keys gripped firmly in her hand. She paused, looking at the gathering of neighbors on her lawn, and then deliberately unlocked her front door. "This house was my home yesterday. It is my home today, and it will be my home tomorrow," she announced, her voice carrying across the yard. "No one is taking it from me." The neighbors applauded, some wiping tears. As dusk settled over the street, children rode bikes across the same asphalt where Harlan had thrown that punch a week ago. Reid stood beside his mother on the porch, watching the simple freedom of wheels spinning under streetlights. The street no longer belonged to power. It belonged to people again. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.